Okay folks, we're going to try to do one more video tonight because I don't want to ruin my throat too much. Okay, ended the last one off, and Germany was in a pretty bad position. They hit the depression. People lost faith in all of the other political parties who'd been in charge in the coalition. They'd been made to look useless in how they dealt with the depression, with the, for example, with the increase in their taxes and not being able to offer the print of the money, and wage cuts for public sector workers, and reducing unemployment benefit when it was needed most. So these parties, after what had happened at the end of World War One, and then what's happened at the end of the 20s, the people of Germany's got a very negative view of all these political parties, and they want a leader who can do something about the depression. One who's a strong leader, one who's going to give them their jobs back, who's going to give them their pride back, who's going to give them their food back, who's going to make their families safe. And basically the Nazis are willing to promise anything they can to get power in Germany. Now, just so you understand, Germany ran a very strange system, quite a fair one in some respects, in that it was called proportional representation. You won't need to mention that on the exam, but basically it means that whatever your percentage of votes your party gets, it's the percentage of votes of seats you'd have in Parliament, the Reichstag. And basically what that meant usually was that lots of parties got seats, but no one party controlled Parliament. So you usually had coalition governments. Now, the man who would run the Reichstag, the Parliament, would be the Chancellor, so he was like a Prime Minister. But overseeing the Prime Minister would be a President, and the President would be elected. He would have more power, but he usually would only intervene in times of emergency. The President could choose the Chancellor, and the President was Hindenburg. But for day-to-day running of Parliament, it was entrusted to the leader of the biggest party, usually, and that was the Chancellor. So Hitler wants the Chancellorship, second in command of Germany. Now, the Nazis promised that they would get jobs for people by lots of state-financed public works programs. So, building of roads, buildings, like building buildings, schools, etc. Anything that needed to be built that could be financed by public work programs, the Nazis would put people back to work in these. They said, if you had a business, we'll help you increase your profits. So they appealed to employers. They told farmers, you will have our backing. And they told small businesses like shopkeepers, you too will profit under us. And they basically said that they were going to give Germans their pride back. The people of Germany had had their pride taken away by the defeat in World War One, by the Treaty of Versailles, by the disasters at the start of the 20s and the disasters at the end of the 20s with the Depression. So they said, we're going to make this country great again. You're going to be proud to be German. You're going to be proud of your country you live in. You're going to be proud of your government. And they appealed to the majority of German people that, if you think about it, that's unemployed, that's anyone who's, loves Germany, it's people who are employers, people who would want a job, so employees, farmers, shopkeepers, small businesses, everyone. And they said that the people who were to blame, the scapegoats, were Jews and communists. They're two big enemies. So it was almost like, you've done nothing wrong, you're all okay, it's these two small groups over here. So the focused, very simple emotion of hate and dislike on minority groups, the communists being their main opponent, and Jews who were easy to attack as scapegoats in society and always had been. Now, the Nazis ran a very slick machine, and they organised mass rallies. So, great speeches, waving of very colourful flags, torchlit parades, uniforms where everyone was wearing the same uniform. When they did win the election, I read an account by an older lady, I believe, and she said she remembered Hitler becoming Chancellor and this torchlit parade going through Berlin, and they were waving their banners. The Nazis were singing their songs. They were all marching in unison, wearing their uniforms, carrying flame-lit torches. And she said it was a beautiful sight because it was organised. It was a sense of discipline, and it made people feel as though there was strength there in Germany again, as though someone was taking power. So these types of things had happened before that as well, and attracted people to it. They ran a lot of poster campaigns, just like the communists. So there was posters all over which carried powerful messages about buying Mein Kampf. Some of them show Hitler as like being smiled upon by God. What German women could do to help out. You name it, they did it. Alright, buy a radio when Hitler's Chancellor, so you can hear him speak, because that was his greatest asset, his speaking. Now, a man called Joseph Goebbels was in charge of the propaganda element of the Nazis, and basically Goebbels knew that the greatest asset the party had was the speaking of Hitler. So it was imperative with elections coming up that Hitler got to as many people as possible, because people said when they saw Hitler speak, they felt as though there could be thousands there. He was speaking directly to them. So Goebbels came up with his Hitler over Germany campaign, where Hitler would be flown from place to place in the aeroplane, which was still a relatively new invention, so as many people as possible could experience Hitler live, hear him speak, and be taken in with the speaking and also the whole parades that the Nazis had at that time. Right? So this was big. Right? On top of that, they had the SA, the stormtroopers, and the SA basically would bully communists. They would stop them getting organised, stop them running their campaigns, stop them having rallies. So the SA basically also protected Hitler. So if the communists turned up at a Nazi rally and tried to disrupt Hitler, they'd beat them up. Right? They were like, they were thugs, that's all they were. Former demobilised soldiers who were now beating up communists, anyone who spoke out against Hitler. So there was terror used as well. And the results of this are that in 1930 the Nazis have increased in the Reichstag to 107 seats. By July of 1932 it was 230 seats. Now in another election, because they were constantly having elections, in November of 1932 this is only 196 seats, but the point I'm making is the Nazis were the biggest party in the Reichstag, but they didn't have over 50% of the seats to control it, and that's what Hitler wanted. So he made his point. He was the leader of the biggest party. So the next thing he does is he stands for president. Now he wasn't going to win this election, but what you do see is in 1932 Hindenburg gets 19 million people approximately voting for him. Hitler gets 13 million. Now you can say, well, he lost, and he did, but that's 13 million people have voted for Adolf Hitler. In 1923 he was only known in Bavaria when he was taking over a beer hall. By 1932 13 million people in Germany have backed him. So it's look how far the Nazis had come. Leader of the biggest party in the Reichstag and 13 million voters in the presidential election. So what you've got is Hitler is in a position to demand this chancellorship. He wants Hindenburg to make him chancellor, and really Hindenburg by rights should have, because he was the leader of the biggest party, but he doesn't like Hitler, and you can tell why, you can see why. So Hindenburg does everything he can to stop Hitler being chancellor, and he uses his emergency powers as president to actually make somebody else chancellor, and that was a man called von Papen, who was leader of the Centre Party. Nowhere near the amount of votes of Adolf Hitler. And Hindenburg has made a mistake, and one of his advisors, von Schleicher, says, if you keep this guy in charge, von Papen, the army might rebel, they don't like him, he must be replaced. So you think, okay, Hindenburg's going to appoint Hitler. No, because he dislikes Hitler, he hates him. So in 1932 he puts von Schleicher in charge. Now von Schleicher can't control the Reichstag because it's full of Nazis, and they're not going to listen to him. And Hitler's even at the point now getting at Hindenburg in the press by writing an open letter, for example, saying how great a leader he is and how he admires him. So the public are saying to Hindenburg, well, why won't you put this guy in charge? So Hindenburg has to do what he never wanted to do, and he calls Hitler to see him, and he's going to make him the Chancellor. But Hindenburg thought he could outmaneuver Hitler. In other words, he thought he could outdo him. Now remember, Hindenburg was an old man, so he says, I'm making you Chancellor, but you're going to be actually taking von Papen as your Vice-Chancellor, and your government is going to be full of von Papen supporters. So in other words, on the surface, Hitler's got the Chancellorship, people in Germany will be happy, the Reichstag will be happy, but underneath, it'll be von Papen and his men controlling Hitler. So Hitler basically says, yeah, thanks very much, I'll take the position of Chancellor, swears in, and then says, right, what we're going to do is we're going to have another election, and his idea is if he can get another election, his popularity is at an all-time high, and he'll get over 50% of the seats in the Reichstag. This is his plan, so he can then manipulate the laws and basically sort out this whole who controls Adolf Hitler with von Papen and such. So we basically get another election going, and we'll see who runs the Reichstag then. That's going to be really important when we come to look at the Reichstag fire. So Hitler is now Chancellor. Thanks for watching.